Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Today, I'm so pleased to have with me Sheri West. She is the founder of LiveGirl, a nonprofit girls leadership organization that builds confident, inclusive leaders and aims to close the female leadership gap. Sheri has a passion for equity and inclusion and over 25 years of corporate and leadership development experience, just the type of guest we want on this show. She was formerly an executive at GE, where she was instrumental in the Women's Network and taught leadership development courses at the GE Management Development Institute. She now pays it forward to the next generation of fierce, love that, Sheri, love that, fierce female leaders. No wonder we get along so well. Since 2014, LiveGirl has served over 12,000 girls in grades 5 through college through its innovative leadership development and mentoring program. Wow. Sheri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Simone. I'm so thrilled to be here. And also thank you for serving on the LiveGirl Advisory Council. We are so fortunate to have your expertise guiding us forward.
Oh, awesome. I love it. I can't wait till my daughter is in 5th grade so she can participate. She is now 6, so we have some time, but I'm excited and keeping my eye on all this great work that you're doing. So this show is about the driver's seat. And the driver's seat means that you're not hands off when it comes to your career. So did you know that you always wanted to get involved in leadership development?
Short answer, no. I mean, I can tell you about when I thought I was in the driver's seat, and then when I finally did actually get into the driver's seat. I think, I grew up in Michigan and went straight from undergrad and then got my graduate degree in leadership development, and then began my corporate career at first at Pepsi Cola and then at GE, where I spent almost 17 years traveling the world. I had just a phenomenal career there and very exciting opportunities. I literally worked in every continent in the world. And I thought I was in the driver's seat during my corporate career because I kept getting promoted and I kept on that very predefined career progression track that we all hear about and that we all seek to be on. But then I will tell you, Simone, that along the way, later in my career, I had 3 kids. And after, about a year after my third was born, I essentially was forced to take a career pause because I think that whole system wasn't meant for a mother with 3 kids. And interestingly, I just finished Rashma Sajani's Pay Up book, The Future of Women in Work. And, it really put a lot of, I think she's got it absolutely right. She talks about dismantling this whole concept of having it all and how that's really just a euphemism for doing it all. And that book really made me sit and think and reflect on that career pause that I took, and I'm very proud that I took that career pause, and then came back in 2014 to found LiveGirl. And that, Simone, is when I finally got into the driver's seat.
I love that because it seemingly, as you accelerate in your career, it seems that you're in the driver's seat, but you're saying until you took that pause. How long was that pause?
I was out for about 4 years.
Okay.
Raising 3 beautiful humans. And I think it was a lot of reflection during that career pause. To be honest, when I was taking that career pause, it was a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress about what was next. How am I going to get back? And now in my adult wisdom, looking back, that's one of the messages that I constantly delivering to the young women in our program that, there is one right career path, right? You just, you focus on doing good work and the next job will take care of itself. And, taking an intentional career pause can be a beautiful gift. And it can be almost a beautiful reset to really, truly getting you into the driver's seat that you're looking for.
I love that, because I took a career pause, sabbatical, and it was a 3-month sabbatical, and just instrumental. It just is that reset. I felt like I needed a timeout before just quitting outright. I just needed to stop and smell the roses outside and to figure out what makes me happy. What do I want to do? And so absolutely love that you're saying that pause helped you to get in the driver's seat. And so where did the idea come from in terms of starting a nonprofit?
So my background both my academic background with my master's in leadership development, and then while I was in the corporate world at GE, had a lot of leadership development experience. I actually was taught leadership development classes at GE Crotonville, which is its world-renowned management institute. And also had, as I mentioned earlier, 3 kids along the way, 2 boys and a girl. And as a parent, starting to observe the world, in terms of how that experience is different for boys versus girls, and really starting to reflect on all those different obstacles that I had faced as a woman in a corporate environment. And, I actually sat my family down and I said, we got to do something here. We need to pay it forward. I was committed to creating a better world for my daughter, one in which she could thrive, and, truly have it all. So in the way that the system and the support network would support her to have it all versus the other way around. Currently, women support everyone else, right? And so, founding LiveGirl back in 2014 was my opus. And, what I'm probably, other than the birth of my 3 children, most proud of, we've grown exponentially year over year. We are, the social impact that we're making in terms of, tangible progress towards closing both the gender and racial inequality gaps. And like I said, I feel like I'm truly in the driver's seat, meaning that success is now defined by me, right? And success is so much more than money. For me, success is defined by making progress for women and girls, advocating for women and girls, and really even just changing one life. And that's how I define success today.
I think I just came up with the title of your episode, Redefine Success. I love it. Success on your terms, being in the driver's seat. See, I told you it comes up during the interview. Some nugget that you have said just resonates with me. So redefine success. I love that. I wonder if you can tell us, because you've sat in the corporate space, you've had all these different experiences, nonprofit space. What would you say are the key ingredients to powerfully owning your career? In essence, your formula for owning your career.
So I think one thing I've learned first and foremost is to be strengths driven. And unfortunately, I think there are way too many companies and managers that are just the opposite. They're very deficit driven, right? We've all been there in that employee review where, the manager says, oh, here's a couple of things you're doing well, and here's 3 huge things you need to work on to get better and to get to the next level. And you leave that development session thinking, oh crap, like I suck, right? Rather, I think there's so much positive psychology here. I rather believe that to own your career, you need to be strengths driven, right? And to be really self-aware and to have that emotional intelligence to know what your strengths are. And for me, it's essentially the fact that I am a positively energizing, inclusive, and innovative leader. And I now lean into those strengths for my career to drive my career success. Sure, we all have things that we can work on, but that's what a team is for as well, right? So when we're working in teams, to be aware of what each other's strengths are and to leverage those strengths. I believe in a shared leadership model where we all lean on each other for those strengths. And I truly think that is the formula for career excellence. I think, the innovation that I mentioned is so essential. I think a lot of people, especially coming out of corporate America, kind of we're taught that there's just one great way to do things. And, I'm a voracious reader. I also just recently read Adam Grant's Think Again book, and it's a Bible. I mean, it's like, it's an enlightenment about how we need to be rethinking everything we do all the time. Every assumption, every process, every program. We need to be rethinking our career goals and our career path. We need to be rethinking to innovate. And I try to bring that into everything I do. Certainly everything we do at LiveGirl, we pride ourselves on our innovative leadership development and mentoring. And again, I think that's been a kind of a formula for my career success at LiveGirl.
Love that. And you dropped resources. That's one of the questions that I ask on this podcast to help our listeners really learn from leaders. What did you use? What resources? You talked about really leaning into reading. I think reading and education are so powerful. They're powerful levers for career excellence. What resources come to mind for you, additional resources that really were instrumental in helping you on your journey?
Well, I think I've listened to some of your previous podcast episodes. I do having that success squad is so important. You talk about it, but having the right, we at LiveGirl, we talk about developing that instead of a board of directors, a board of me. And so to envision that, there's a table and you're sitting you're at the center seat in the table, but then you need to fill in all the other seats around the table with people that can be your success squad. I love that you, Simone, that's your term, but you need mentors, people who can guide you. You need sponsors, people who can make things happen for you. And you need to network to fill up that table. And I think for a lot of young people, the networking is hard, especially as we were going through the pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. Networking is a challenge. And I just want to point out the word work in networking. It does need to be intentional about networking. But I find in my personal life, like every time I make a connection, most often something comes out of it, right? So I'm very purposeful and intentional about building those connections. I think that's how we build value. For LiveGirl, for example, like I'm constantly networking to find, good diverse mentors for our girls, speakers who can provide a different perspective, board and advisory council members, corporate partners and sponsors and allies. So I'm constantly building value through connections to amplify our work.
Well, can you give us some tips? You seem to be in the driver's seat in this area. Can you give us some tips, our listeners, some tips on how to be more effective? We know that it's a lot of work, and some folks are introverted or challenged, just scared by the very word itself, instead of thinking about relationships. But anyway, give us some tips that have worked for you over the years on how to build, how to cultivate these relationships that you have built, so that if you need to pivot in your career and you need to ask, give us an example of how that's worked for you.
Well, sure. I mean, first of all, I would describe myself as more of a social introvert, which surprises a lot of people because I'm so often on public stages with LiveGirl, but meaning, give me a Friday night and I would much prefer to be at home with a glass of wine and some pizza. Like that's how I recharge and refuel. But I'm constantly on the lookout for community events where I can be out meeting people, talking to people, connecting with people. And then I always follow up. Hey, it was so great to meet you. I loved our conversation on this topic. Here's a couple ideas that we might be able to explore in the future. And I link in with them, right? And that's just intentional networking. And even if there's not an action in the now, that lays the foundation for the future. And so I think it's just this process over and over again, and really actually leaning into that and finding some joy in that process. And now I do, I find it so interesting to get out and meet different people with different backgrounds and experiences and to hear their story. And I almost find a thrill or a challenge in putting the puzzle pieces together. Like, here's what you can do, here's what I've got, and here's how that could fit together in a synergistic way, right? So I think it's just being intentional and putting yourself out there and taking risks and meeting people and fostering that network, right? So it's not just like a one and done. It's not just like I met you, now we're done. It's actually following up. So I would say from a LiveGirl standpoint, we serve girls in grade 5 through college. The best networkers are the young women that I mentor that then follow back up with me, every few months. Hey, Sheri, just checking in. Just wanted you to know that I've got this great new opportunity at school, or I'm applying for this great new internship this summer. Just wanted you to know, right? And then often I'll be like, oh, great. That was great outreach from that young woman. Oh, and by the way, make sure you meet this person at that internship company and I'll connect her, right? And so it's the follow-up too. And it's the fostering of the network down the road. That's so important.
And what I heard you say is, though, there's some time to think. So that closing paragraph that you mentioned where you said, here are some ways that we can collaborate in the future, that requires you to pause and think about this person that you just met. How can you collaborate and to plant the seed? Love that. Plant the seed for the future.
Absolutely. I love your recap.
No problem. No problem. So when you were out of the driver's seat, what work did you have to do to get yourself back into the driver's seat?
So for me, it does come back to the networking, right? And leaning into your network and, kind of being unabashed about asking for help. I think we all are so afraid to ask for help, but after I took that career pause, I mean, and then I had the vision for LiveGirl. The first thing I did was I kind of went on a road trip, or like a networking tour, so to speak, of, I intentionally sat down and thought, okay, here's, the 10 or 20 nonprofit leaders, experts in women's leadership, corporate business type partners that might be interested in funding. And I remember this so vividly, like literally just filled up my calendar with meetings and just went on the road. And it was kind of a listening tour because I wasn't really sure at that point exactly the shape or form that LiveGirl would take, right? But then after that listening tour and after doing the research and the homework, I knew what was needed. And from LiveGirl's standpoint, it's the need that needed to be filled was that for girls, confidence plummets during puberty and never recovers, right? And there are other girls serving organizations out there, but most or all focus on the younger age. They focus on like K through 5. So we picked up in 5th grade, we picked up in middle school during those very awkward adolescent years when, girls are starting to replace their parents with peers as their key influencers. And when their bodies are changing and they're starting to make real important decisions, but yet they won't go to their parents, right? And we know actually if a girl is feeling sad, anxious, or depressed, she won't talk to a parent, teacher, or counselor. So the importance for confidence boosting leadership programs and mentors is especially important in this age range during the middle school adolescent years. And then we grew LiveGirl, and now we continue through college, which, it's all about in middle school, giving girls the skills to lead themselves, in high school, giving them opportunities to lead others, and then in college, giving them the skills to lead in the workforce. And our signature program there is called She Works, where we are training young women in career readiness skills and matching them with paid internships at companies that demonstrate female leadership. So I think, looping back to your initial question, like, how did I kind of get out of that career pause and back to next step? It's really by leaning into my network.
There's so many titles that your episode could be, Sheri. Each time I thought I had it, and then do your homework popped up for me. Bored of me. I love that. There are lots of nugget. I wonder, so if you wrote a book on your career body of work, what would the title of that book be?
Don't tempt me, because I've actually, this is like a dream of mine to
write
a tome for young women, because I feel like
it's needed.
At 52, there's so much I can, both through my academic and my leadership development experience, but just like personal wisdom at this age, where you look back and there's so much I want to impart on this next generation, these next gen leaders. They're so fierce. We used that word in the beginning, but they're so fierce, and they do have the power inside of them. They just need the support, the mentors, and the access to thrive, right? And so that's what we're trying to solve for.
So what's the title of the book?
How about I don't know, lean into your network is pretty savvy title, I'm thinking.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that book. That was a seed. It's coming. It's needed. Awesome. So what about risk? Any advice for our listeners on how to lean into taking more risk in their careers?
Yeah, I think it's so important to take risks. And I've always been a risk taker. And Simone, we were talking before we hit the record button that I broke my ankle last week rock climbing. So clearly your listeners should know that I am a risk taker in many different ways. But I think, unfortunately, that's one of the gender norms that we're trying to disrupt, is that girls are taught to just to really strive for perfection. And so they're so afraid to take those risks. But, I love that quote, well-behaved women seldom make history, right? If you really want to make the change or disrupt, you got to take risks. And sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And that's life. That's the way it should be. And there's so much richness and glory and failing forward and really learning from the risk you took and the failure and making it better the next time. And I think as it relates to your podcast and finding your career purpose, I think the risk is essential, because too many of us just continue along this pre-programmed career track, right? The one that, we hear about from our families or see in the media and think that that's it. And you're not going to know any different unless you take a risk, right? And I think for all the listeners, I think you don't have to know what you're doing in 20 years from now. I hate when people ask little kids, what are you going to be when you grow up? Who knows? Who knows if the world's going to be around when you grow up? But just focus on your current job, making impact, and the right next job for you, and take a risk along the way. And you know what? You might surprise yourself, and you might find that you veer into a very different path, but one that makes you much happier and more fulfilled.
Oh, all of that was so good, Sheri. I'm just thinking back to what I wanted to be when I was growing up, and how much that has changed with life experiences and leaning into risk. I love how you reframed it to just figuring out, allowing yourself to figure out by saying yes to opportunities and yes to these different risks. Love how you did that. That was wonderful. Well, as we begin to wrap up the podcast, that went by fast. So many good nuggets here. Any parting words of advice that you can leave with our listeners?
I think, the parting shot is just, lean into your purpose. And for anyone whose purpose is, contributing to a world free from gender and racial inequality, find us, LiveGirl at Go LiveGirl. We're doing our part. We're working to make progress for women and girls. There's a lot of work to be done. But I'm confident that we will make a world that's better for my daughter and your daughter, Simone.
I know, when you were talking before about, first of all, I was thinking about Turning Red, the movie, about puberty. And I was just, and about not listening to your parents. And I was just thinking, my daughter's 6. I was like, oh man, this is not good. No, I love the purpose of what you're doing, and, continued success in it. If people listening to the podcast want to connect with you directly, how should they do so?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, at Sheri West, and, you can find LiveGirl at Go LiveGirl. And we're on all the social media platforms.
Wonderful. Well, Sheri, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Absolutely. I love your podcast, Simone.
Thank you. I appreciate all the love and all the wisdom you left with our listeners.
Absolutely.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.